I cannot imagine that he could have abided the social and educational authoritarianism which Blair has somehow made part of his project. The whole idea of curfews, of the Minister of Education laying down how much homework children should do, of police cars taking beggars off the street. I can't imagine that he would have had any truck with anything of that kind, but I just cannot imagine he would be in favour of somebody sitting at the centre of government telling citizens how to behave.
But Blair, like a modern evangelist, clearly does believe that this is part of his function.
I believe in the Labour Party and its values, but I believe that they must be applied to a world today wholly different from the world of our ancestors. And that's the alternative this country needs. And I can explain it to you, perhaps best in very simple, almost human terms. I mean, I'm a sort of modern man, if you like, you know? I'm part of the rock and roll generation, the Beatles, colour TVs, and all the rest of it.
The Blair Crusade is an interesting one. There are lots of analogies that I think work quite well with the church. Very revivalist, almost fundamentalist in some ways. A great clap-happy kind of atmosphere where you all come together, you sing the songs, you hear the words, and to a large extent the text is handed down from on high, rather like receiving the Ten Commandments. And you all go away with a great feel-good factor. But in New Labour, if you sin against the church, you're cast out forever.
But the glitz notwithstanding, the message Blair preaches is actually based on some old-fashioned values.
And I don't pretend to you that I had a deprived childhood. I didn't. But I learned a sense of values in my childhood.
Tony Blair's education began in the discreetly charming environs of Durham Choir School.
One couldn't have wanted a better sort of pupil. He was very extrovert and very enthusiastic, and the smile wasn't put on, it was genuine. He was in love with life, I think.
Durham Choir School is a pretty perfect paradigm of the values of the Anglican establishment, and the young Tony Blair was a pretty perfect product of it. Bright, enthusiastic, and good at sports and saying his prayers.
I would defy anybody to live in the shadow of this cathedral for 5 years and not have some of its aura sweep off on one.
But then came the harsher realities of Fettes College in Edinburgh. Here, the sons of the ruling classes, and by Blair's time some of the daughters too, learnt about rightful role in society.
I don't think the moral authoritarianism comes from Macquarie at all. I think it comes from his public school. He went to a rather harsh authoritarian public school. He revolted against its values, but he seems to be coming back to them.
But if Blair's moral authoritarianism has its root in his childhood, so too does his faith in the family as the bedrock of what he calls the new social order, his decent society. Blair had a peripatetic early life. In the first 5 years, he and his family moved from Scotland to Australia before settling in Durham. It was there that he had a traumatic experience which he himself says was crucial in shaping his beliefs.
When he was about 11, his father had an appalling stroke, and it was very uncertain whether he would live or die. I spent a lot of that day with Tony, calming him down. We said prayers together.
And it taught me something. It taught me the value of the family, because my mother worked for 3 years to help him talk and walk again. But it taught me something else too. When that happened, the fair weather friends, they went. That's not unusual. But the real friends, the true friends, they stayed with us. They helped us, and they stuck with us for no other reason than that it was the right thing to do.
But Tony Blair was to face another personal trauma. Having already seen his strong and ambitious father disabled in his prime, just 2 weeks after he graduated from Oxford, he lost his loving and gentle mother to cancer. Given those tragedies, it's perhaps not surprising that the family should have become such an ideal to be striven for in his new society.
The death of his mother was a formative moment in his life, a critical moment, and that increased his feeling of commitment to do something with his life.
But the way he set about doing something with his life revealed a hitherto unsuspected talent. He was about to demonstrate the combination of charm, ambition and sheer brass neck which was eventually to take him to number 10. In 1976 he applied for a pupillage in the chambers of Derry Irvine QC, but there was a problem. Irvine took only one pupil at a time.
The pupil that I had arranged to take for the year was an outstanding young law graduate from the London School of Economics called Cherie Booth, who had got a first-class honours degree there and had been top of the bar finals. But really, almost very late today, Tony Blair bowled through my door and said he wanted to be my pupil. There was no real advance note at all, apart from a letter of application.
So Tony Blair met not just the man who was to become second adult mentor, but also the brilliant young woman and childhood socialist who was to become his wife. But first he had to persuade Irvine to take on a second pupil. He put on the charm.
He gave me the impression that the thing that he most wanted in life was to become my pupil. So he was very persuasive.
Last week, Derry Irvine was made Lord Chancellor by Tony Blair. But it was in this building in Hackney, London, that Blair was first to apply his talent for getting his own way to politics. The secretary of the local Labour Party branch to which the Blairs had moved was Mike Davis. He was standing for re-election, but Blair, just 4 months a member, had a surprise.
Unbeknown to me, Tony had also put his hat into the ring. Not only put his hat into the ring, he'd done a bit of mobilising. He'd been ringing around the elderly members and the inactive members, and it obviously turned out quite a large number because I think there were over 30 at the meeting. And he managed to get himself elected. It was unusual to have somebody move into a ward and put themselves forward virtually straight away for political office. Clearly quite an ambitious new member.
Ambitious indeed. He was soon to abandon the uncertainties of local politics for the certainties of the Beaconsfield by-election of 1982. There were two certainties in particular. One, he would lose, and two, because it was a by-election, he'd attract the attention of senior members of the party.
I met him there, I heard him, and I thought that he was an extraordinarily good candidate. And I was pretty certain that we would hear from him again, and we did.
Tony Blair is about to address a group of businessmen, and typically he opens with a gag.
Alors, vous devez savoir que la personne qui vous adresse aujourd'hui était une fois l'interprète du père de Eric Cantona à un match de foot. C'était la seule chose que j'ai fait dans ma carrière politique dont mes enfants sont fiers.
But untypically for a British Prime Minister, he's at ease in Europe, both politically and linguistically.
Chose pour savoir où vous en êtes un peu de votre réflexion sur l'Europe.
And after taking tea with the President, time for a trip down memory lane and a quiet drink in a hotel where he'd once had a holiday job.
I did a spell as a barman. I loved Paris. I even liked Parisians, though I'm told that that's not universal. I just had a great time, and I think it's a fascinating country. And I love French food, and the fact that because of the common market, I could get a job and spend some time working, I suddenly thought, well, this is what it's all about. It determined my political perspective.
Et vous, vous allez bien? Oui, ça va. Vous manquez d'Angleterre?
But the man who once worked as a student barman is now a major political pin-up, seen as a role model for European politicians. So much so that in the current French election campaign, the candidate of the right, the candidate of the left, and even President Chirac claim to be Blairite. It is ironic, therefore, that as Blair himself admits, he would never achieved any of this were it not for his relationship with a former mining community in the north of England. Tony Blair's constituency surgery.
Somebody should just...
With him, his friend and local guru, John Burton, arguably the man to whom he owes most. Because back in 1983, it was John Burton who got him his seat.
Sedgefield was the last constituency to pick an MP, so everybody was here. Joel Barnett, Sid Whale, all those people were coming to try and get the last seat in the country. And Tony had been up a week, I think, and hadn't a nomination. And he noticed that Trimlin Village hadn't picked anyone, so he phoned me up as secretary, and I said, well, come over tonight.
Burton and his comrades managed to get him added lately to the constituency shortlist. But before the man who was to modernise the Labour Party could get selected, it would require some very old-style Labour fixing, and Burton was the man to do it. The clear front-runner for the selection was the left-winger, Les Huckfield.
I had some questions to ask Huckfield, and those questions came from his union, actually, the Transport and General Workers Union, from Moss Evans, through to Joe Mills, the regional organiser, and Joe sent them to me. And one was about his association with militants in the Birmingham area. I asked the militant one myself, which of course is a bit like saying, when did you stop beating your grandmother? I mean, everybody in the hall heard militant Huckfield and thought, good God.
The selectors also had a copy of Blair's hastily typed CV, which implied that Barrister Cherie would move her work to the constituency. That was not to happen, but her father, the left-wing actor Tony Booth of Till Death Us Do Part, and his partner, later wife Pat Phoenix, Elsie Tanner of Coronation Street, did on his behalf as promised. And soon Sedgefield took Blair to its heart.
Everybody loved him. The old ladies on the council thought he was marvellous. They wanted to mother him and everything.
He's our friend, and that's all you need to know.
Blair's friends in the north clearly value their relationship with their MP, and he reciprocates. Indeed, he seems to find in this cross-class rapprochement the promise of the one-nation society to come. And at least they do applaud his jokes.
I was told when I went to meet the Emir of Kuwait that you had to wait for him, because he was a member of the royal family, you had to wait for him to speak to you. In fact, it is the custom of the Arab princes always to wait for you to speak to them first. So I had quite an interesting meeting with him, really. I sat there in complete silence. I finally decided I had to say something, and I asked him, I do apologise for the daftness of this question. I said, well, how is Kuwait then? To which he replied, well, after the Gulf War, it has been difficult. There was then another very long silence. You would probably think at the end of this evening that it's completely disqualified from being Prime Minister.
The smile, but the smile's genuine. The smile, he smiles like that all the time. And I don't know, I like that smile, and I think most of the people around here like the smile.
You're wonderful, thank you. Thank you.
Now and again.
Yeah, you go straight in the House of Lords.